All right, let's watch white human slavery. So first of all, let's take a look. So Matt Walsh popped off once again, king, okay? He's the king of popping the fuck off. Why? It's an article, not a video. Yeah, I don't want to read a fucking dumbass article about the AI box experiment that you've been asking me to fucking read for the past week, okay? I don't care. Maybe later, but probably not. Matt Walsh. Well, over 1 million whites were enslaved in North Africa between the 16th and 19th centuries, most of them abducted and sold by Muslim pirates. Africans were raiding Europe for slaves for hundreds of years. The school system has totally erased this fact from history. First of all, you know, the glories of Muslim pirates doing that was erased, probably because the Western world was embarrassed by the L that they held. Most likely to the Ottoman Empire, most frequently to the Ottoman Empire, the sick man of Europe. Of course, white people were enslaved in other parts of Africa too and across the world for centuries, including in North America, where white servants were shipped to the colonies by the thousands. Matt Walsh is doing the classic, like, chattel slavery is the same as indentured servitude, which of course it's not. Indentured servitude in and of itself is of course still completely unacceptable, obviously. But the main differences in that situation is that you can actually purchase your way, you can purchase your freedom. Not that it's like super likely or whatever, but you can do that where there was no purchasing of your freedom as a black slave, okay? Your child was immediately also seen as property, whereas indentured servitude doesn't work that way as well. And that's precisely why there is a difference between the way that like Irishmen or the way that Italians or the way that like whoever the fuck we're talking about in this situation were able to assimilate or be welcomed into white society in comparison to black people, which Matt Walsh, of course, still doesn't want to welcome into white society. So there you go. Slavery in America didn't begin until 1619. White children were being kidnapped and sold. White children were being kidnapped and sold into servitude in the colonies before that. And of course, slavery existed in America for hundreds of years prior to Europeans never ever setting foot here. Indian tribes all practiced slavery. Slavery persisted. Bro, he's saying slavery. Bro, he's saying slavery is just like permanent, dude. It just happens. You know what I mean? It's just always happened. So what's the point here? Like, I don't understand. Like, white people should be able to do it. Is that the argument here? What's he complaining about? Come on, dude. Everybody does a little bit of slavery. Why can't white people do it? Slavery was an accepted institution in Africa and Asia for millennia, and it seems to have never occurred to any of these societies that there might be something wrong with the practice. And of course, the African slave trade was mostly furnished by Africans. Oh, dude, yeah. This is my favorite. Blaming chattel slavery on black people, like across the board, because black people are a monolith, African people are a monolith, and it's their fault. It's still never white people's fault. Like, white people are purchasing the slaves, they're selling it to one another, they're breeding slaves, they're raping slaves, they're enslaving them, they're brutalizing them, but it's actually, again, back to the black people across the board. None of the main difference here is that what Matt Walsh is doing is fundamentally important. This is why I talk about like the Ottoman tradition of slavery as well, the Devshirme program. Okay. That is entirely different than chattel slavery. Chattel slavery is historically the most morally abhorrent form of slavery, which is interesting to talk about because like they're all atrocious, but like chattel slavery is the big one that is like the most atrocious. Why black people are monolithic? No, black people are not monolithic. They are not a monolith. Matt Walsh is trying to do that right now. Slavery was kind of problematic. The European settlers did cultural appropriation sweaty. What's with your white slave erasure? Being white but doing it right. What are you doing to atone for the crimes committed by your ancestors today? Please share your story in the comments. Namaste. I love this, dude. This is so awesome. Fucking idiots. This type of shit is so dumb and so like so American. I don't know how else to describe it. It's like the self-flagellating you know, me. You know, white people are so fucking, it's so performative. And like some white people literally just have to make even slavery about themselves. You know what I mean? And not in the appropriate way, where it's like, how can I center myself as an overcorrective psychopath? Just fucking be normal, dude. Jesus Christ. The difference is that Europeans created a global billion-dollar market that was incredibly race-based. No other culture did that. Yeah. That too. It's very puritanical Christian self-flagellation. Exactly. No, that's exactly what it is. It's just like, it's weird that you're practicing. I like that you're practicing your kinks safely, but maybe you shouldn't do it in public when other people have not consented to it. You know what I'm saying? Like, if that's your kink, then, you know, that's what you want to do. Keep it to the fucking bedroom, okay? I don't want to see that shit. People constantly talk about fucking kink at Pride, but nobody's talking about white evangelicals doing shit like this or white liberals doing shit like this around children. You know what I mean? That's fucked up too. What is this? Why do you rich fucking white people insist on seeing every socio-political conflict through the myopic lens of your own self-actualization? This isn't about you, so either get with it or get out of the fucking way. Get the shit off screen. No, I think it's so funny. So sorry. That's not white evangelicals. That's white new age libs. No, this is like, no, a lot of these are like hyper Christian people. Yeah, it's Bo Burnham. I know. Slavery is bad, hands down, no doubt. But our modern economy is so heavily built around anti-black slavery and the anti-black racism that was specifically constructed around it as a justification. Yup. And it's still ongoing to this day, which is hilarious because, you know, Matt Walsh completely denies it. As a matter of fact, he's using this as a counter argument to try and continue to deny the racist criminal justice system that is designed in a way to continue having slaves, specifically black and brown slaves, within our criminal justice system. Over policing them, keeping those communities underfunded, creating immigrant detention centers. Again, just, you know, 13th Amendment shit. Pretty whack. How does this Matt Walsh dude have a following? He sounds like a Nazi. You already found your answer to your question. He has a following because he is a Nazi. So let's see what this Turkish guy said. That's bullshit for a number of reasons. These Christians were not enslaved by Africans, i.e. people from sub-Saharan Africa, but by Muslim sailors from the Eastern Mediterranean, renegades of first Italian, Spanish, French, and later English, Scottish, and Dutch origin. Secondly, it's not the numbers, but the treatment of the slaves that matters. In the American case, Africans had no chance to go back, were treated very poorly, could not communicate with their relatives, and had no chance to blend in society that enslaved them. Totally not the case with the Mediterranean example. Christian slaves were used in households and galleys, not on plantations, although rowing in stone galleys was quite harsh. They could and were indeed encouraged to ask for ransom to communicate with their families. They were visited by their relatives. They wrote for them asking for money. When they found money, they were liberated. There were also other venues for freedom. They could buy their own freedom. They could earn money. Indeed, they had to, because they paid their masters for food and lodging. They could convert to Islam, although that did not bring freedom automatically. It helped. Some of them became pashas, so reaching a stratum of society that they could never do so in feudal Europe. This is true about especially the Devshirme program. The Devshirme program was thousands of fucking... It was like, at a certain point, at its peak, obviously there was still enslavement of children, white children, and it's still bad. However, the inverse of that was that there were instances where because of the elevation that people had, because of the elevation that people were able to fucking reach the highest echelon of society as literal fucking slave children, that they became the elites of Ottoman Empire. So many viziers, so many... Mimar Sinan, one of the most famous architects of all time, literally Devshirme. So what the Ottoman Empire would do, they basically created an elevation program for literally the slave class, like for people that they enslaved and educated, specifically with the purpose of elevating them to the highest echelons of society. That is not even remotely comparable to chattel slavery, which is why everybody gets so triggered when I mention that. It still doesn't mean it's adequate. It still doesn't mean it's appropriate. But like, you're literally comparing, you're comparing drastically different treatments and drastically different levels of subjugation to chattel slavery, which had none of that. You're brownwashing the Ottoman Empire. Yeah. Indenture. But no, nobility is true though. Sorry, didn't mean to trick you into reading nobility. No, you said slave class mobility, but no, it is nobility. It's a wild... It's a wild fucking thing to hear about for the first time ever if you've never thought about it. There are some other societies where similar things happened as well, but Ottoman Empire is one of them, where as a slave, as a literal fucking slave, you became a profoundly important consultant to emperors. You became, some of the most famous architects. You became artists. That's not even remotely comparable to chattel slavery. They also were the elite soldiers, obviously, the Janissaries, which have some of the earliest instances of collective action. The Ottoman Empire was not socialist by any means, do not misunderstand me. But Kazan Kaldırmak, the process in which the Janissaries would revolt against the emperor regularly because they were the elite fucking troopers of the emperors. Again, slaves, slave converts, would if they didn't like the amount of pay that they were getting, they would turn around and they had these massive cauldrons in which they would cook the rice for the entire military. They would fucking they would flip the cauldrons over and engage in collective action in like what you would normally consider a strike or a work stoppage. There's a difference between collecting people to be slaves that are in your region and traveling across the world to collect and breed people who look the same and then try to justify by saying they're not people. Both bad. Both are bad, but one is on X Games mode. Exactly. As a Lebanese Christian, I can tell you that yes, the Ottomans occupied us, but they gave us the chance to get high positions in the Ottoman Empire. It was strict but fair rule. It is the Ottoman treatment. The Ottoman treatment of its colonies is drastically different than Western colonialism. Anyone who has ever read a fucking history book will tell you that. Obviously, they're not, you know, the most honorable thing to do in that circumstance is offer autonomy beyond just an autonomous region. And not institute like jizya or a specific tax for non-Muslims. It was still far more preferable to forcible conversion, mass murder, mass execution, which of course came, don't misunderstand me, and that did certainly happen. It is definitely different. Fuck you, they raped and pillaged women in Bulgaria? Of course. Bro, that's empire shit. That doesn't make it right. I'm accounting for that. Do not misunderstand me. And they still had harems. But remember, the comparison is Western colonial expansion versus Ottoman imperialism, which is different. Okay. And the comparison in this circumstance is literally chattel slavery versus enslaving Eastern Europeans and white people. And the moment that you add in upward social mobility all the way to elevation into nobility for enslaved people, you recognize that is like completely outside of the realm of chattel slavery. That's just true. Everyone is in history did horrible things. The Ottoman Empire was strict but fair. We don't actually know if they burned so many villages in the Eastern as is written. No, they definitely did. Come on, dude. They were fucking brutal. Don't get me wrong. The difference between chattel slavery and these other forms of slavery that we're referencing also is that chattel slavery's justification came in the form of race science, race realism. Like the idea that like this race of people had a scientific justification for being enslaved, and that is unique. Stop romanticizing Ottoman. They are evil and they kill Serbs. Ottoman Empire bad. Ottoman people good. The concept of Balkanization has been pretty profoundly devastating for that entire region, I would say. Maybe the Balkans are better off not Balkanizing. You know what I'm saying? You thought about that? Titoist Yugoslavia, or maybe even prior versions. Make Balkans Turk again. Okay, they could convert to Islam. They could be liberated as religious gesture by their Muslim masters, although I believe they were not most of the time. I mean, because they were expensive. Finally, the issue of mistreatment. European sources are full of dreadful, caricaturized stories of how slaves were mistreated, but these were pieces of propaganda were penned by the same agents, Trinitarian and Mercedarians, who had to collect alms for ransoming these slaves. They were also supported by vivid images in the books. The same Trinitarians also forced the Christian slaves that they ransomed to tour France with dirty, nasty clothes in order to soften the hearts of the potential almgivers. Slavery in America is an exceptional case. And by the way, every historian will agree to this. Like, anyone who tries to fucking make it seem like chattel slavery is not different than all other forms of slavery is probably a reactionary white supremacist piece of shit who is trying to drastically and dramatically lower the impact. Okay, no historian would ever, like, historians don't often make normative declarations. Okay, but with one exception, chattel slavery. You understand? And anyone, and I mean anyone that actually fucking tries to make that comparison is probably doing so with ideological purpose. It is straight up. There's two things where you can make that, where you can make statements like that. Nazi Germany and the horrific crimes committed by Nazi Germany, and chattel slavery. Anyway, but nowhere has it reached the level it had in America, and nowhere has it been taken to a scientific level. Literally, like, they fucking invented a science around it. The one drop rule. Things that you still believe to this day. Like Barack Obama not being considered white. Okay? That is a concept that was invented by racist people to justify slavery. Do you understand? Obama's half white. Nobody thinks he's white. Why do you think that is the case? Everybody thinks everybody will say Obama is black. Obama is the first black president. despite him being half white. Why? Where does that come from? These are concepts that were created, okay? These are concepts that were created. This is all learned behavior. It comes from the one drop rule, a scientific scientific justification for purity politic. That's where it comes from. And it was done with the purpose of justifying slavery, saying that black people deserve to be enslaved, saying that saying that this kind of mistreatment was actually not that bad because they were not like full human. That was the point. To get to the ideological reasoning, before liberalism, it was just okay to enslave humans. With the proclamation of liberal humanism, empire needed to justify enslaving black people by denying them their humanity. Yep, that is 100% correct. They wanted to keep doing the slavery shit, but they also wanted to feel good about it. God, I love liberals. That's why whenever some motherfucker says I'm a classical liberal, it's like, yeah, you were a liberal at a time when like you wanted to justify slavery. I love that. The Dan Dangler. Hey, Hassan, my roommate always has you on the TV. Enjoy your streams. Thank you to your roommate. Not you. I'm just kidding. Thank you for watching. Does phrenology fall into that category? It absolutely does. Phrenology is an extension of the same exact thing that I was talking about. Phrenology, skull sciences, is also a part of the antiquated race realist or scientific racism, basically. Muslims enslaved Christians and vice versa, but they never thought the other was intrinsically inferior. You could convert and switch camps, were ensured of more or less humane, depending on the time and circumstances, obviously. Treatment, you were part of the same Mediterranean monotheistic culture. No big cultural difference compared to gestures. Compare gestures and expressions in Italian, Spanish, and Turkish, for instance. So no Italian has ever thought a Turk an inferior human being, never tried to dehumanize them. Also, North Africa is not Africa, is part of the Mediterranean. There's a whole big desert that isolates it from the rest of Africa. Nothing in it, climate, fauna, flora, let alone traditions and culture, resemble the rest of Africa. So Africans enslaving Europeans is total bullshit. Everybody could fall victim to the whims of fate. That was just the way things were. Moreover, there were many former Christians, up to 37% at one point in Algeria. Among these Muslim pirates who enslaved Christians, grow up and stay away from handy and neat generalizations. Also, yeah, he already mentioned this. Okay. I'm North African. I'm African. Yes, but the difference between that is like Pokimane. Iman is Moroccan. Do you understand? North Africa is, of course, still a part of Africa, but North Africa is not what you're thinking of when you think of the entirety of the African continent. When people often make these like monolithic arguments about Africa, they are referencing West Africa or a specific part of Africa, especially as it pertains to chattel slavery. The distinction he's making is that the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa region, had different cultures and were individually responsible for the enslavement of Christians that that Matt Walsh was trying to blame on the rest of Africa. Do you get it? Do you understand? Okay. Imagine thinking thin-lipped and pasty is superior. Hey, I'm Moroccan too. I think the ethnic group is bad. Or Arabic, which are separated quite a bit from the rest of Africa ethnically. Exactly. It's like, who is allowed to say the N-word? You know what I mean? That's like, Iman can't at the end of the day. If you want to talk about it in a joking manner, then think about it like that. It's a very simple distinction. She still does, though. Yeah, totally, dude. All the time. Yeah, definitely. What is wrong with your fucking brain, dude? Like, well, what the fuck is wrong with people? You just made that up. You just completely made that up. Literally on stream? Not true. Just a complete falsehood. It's such a wild thing to just lie about, too. Source, I made it all up. Did you see the edited clip of her going around manosphere circles recently is what that chatter is talking about? Dude, imagine getting fucking duped by some of the dumbest, most racist motherfuckers on the internet, dude. That's awesome. I love when you have a worldview built around empathy, but then you unironically get duped by people who know you're a dumbass, okay? Who know you are stupid enough to foolishly jump at every fucking opportunity to be like, yeah, this person's probably saying the M-word. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I believe it. And they just dupe you. They dupe you just like Andrew Tate dupes motherfuckers into like, buying his MLM. They dupe you by cutting shit out, cutting clips out of context and shit like that. It's just, you're no different than those idiots.